Hey guys, well, since the show can only show so much, the tongue twister, I figured I would explain kind of what happened with the moose hunt a little more in detail from Alone Season 6, episode, I guess 4 and 5 kind of bleed into each other. In episode 4, I kind of did a more detailed write-up on what went down, but it was basically I had a moose come in at night at one point, but realized I wasn't going to be able to get out of bed to hunt moose if I heard them. It'd already be too late. They'd hear me getting out of my sleeping bag. And even with all my clothes on and dressed up as much as I could be, you can't really sit out in that kind of cold that's at night there for hours, especially with your hands uncovered and stuff that you would need to take a bow shot. So I was gonna have to come up with another way of hunting than just sitting there in a blind. What I ended up coming up with was the cans, so I set out that string of cans. One morning I heard the moose come through and it just worked beautifully. The moose walked through the cans clanked and actually scared the moose, and he ran across from the mainland, across the mud flat to my little island, and then he turned his back and stared at the cans that scared him. So when I came out in I heard the ruckus and crawled out in my long johns, didn't have time to get anything ready, grabbed my camera, grabbed my bow and an arrow, snuck over there. He was, as it turns out, 43 yards away from the edge of the brush, so I could only sneak up to the mud flat, couldn't get any closer, and that's where I had to take my shot. But because he was such a huge moose, beautiful animal, that when I estimated the range, I thought he was closer than he was. Not only was he huge, but it was a flat, so you can't really judge distance very easily because no trees or anything to go by. So I misjudged the distance, took my shot, dropped the arrow between his legs. Probably would have had time to take another shot, but when I rushed to get out of my shelter and grab my camera, I only had grabbed one arrow. So that was a real bummer, but he took off. As he was running away, that's when I got the shot of him that you see in the show as he's trotting across the water. So I waited a while and decided to track a little ways, see where he went. As I was tracking, kind of noticed that a lot of the moose trails would go through probably a 300-yard gap between two rocky cliffs, and so I decided, well, maybe I'll build a moose funnel fence here so that they would all end up in one. Any moose that walked through there would end up on one trail rather than just wandering through anywhere. So that's what I built at the end of episode 4. I built that little real quick, not a nice, definitely not an exemplar, but I built a little funnel fence, and that was where season 4 ended. Episode 5 begins with me taking a shot. So what led up to that shot is I was out hunting, checking my snares and stuff, and I noticed that some wolverines and predators had started to get on my snare lines. They were starting to eat stuff out before I could get to it. I'd still get something here and there, but that was a little upsetting. And then as I was out checking the snares in the morning, I heard a clink of some can line that I had set in front of my funnel fence a ways. That's what you see me like, oh, did I just hear what I thought I heard in the video? And then I run over to take my shot. I didn't bother getting too fancy with the camera as I had done before and missed the whole thing. So I just grabbed the camera, threw it on the ground, ran to the bush that was on this side of the funnel fence. I figured if the moose is coming, he's coming this way, and hid behind that bush. The actual shot you see me take is a second shot I took at that moose. So what happened is he was coming, and he's kind of 45-degree angle towards me, and I thought, like I figured if I waited, I'd probably get a close 20-yard broadside shot on him, but I just didn't want to take the risk. It's a pretty intense situation. So as soon as I saw him, I was, oh my goodness, I had an arrow out, took my shot. It was a little over 20 yards, but not very far, and he was quartering towards me, which can be kind of a tough shot, because when he's standing like this, to hit him in the lungs, you really got to get it close to the shoulder, because just a few inches and the back of your arrow is just gonna go through his guts. But anyway, I felt like I took my shot. It felt really good. It hit him maybe an inch or two farther back than I was hoping, but it hit him, and I knew it was a pretty good shot. But he didn't immediately just take off running. He turned and did a little spin like that and put his mouth towards where he'd gotten hit. And for a minute I just stared at him like, oh my goodness, that was a good shot. And then I was like, oh, what am I doing? I should shoot him again. And I pull out another arrow and walk over to try to get another shot as he starts to trot off. And that's actually the shot you see on the show. So if you're watching and you see that's a little rush, a little odd technique, it was because I was trying to put another arrow in him as he was running away, which I missed and lost my arrow. But anyway, the moose took off. That was one of the most intense days of my life. I was so you just want to go search for that moose so bad and see if you killed it, but I know from experience that you don't run after an animal right after you hit it when you're bow hunting. You gotta wait an hour or so, let it bleed out. So I went back to my shelter and did everything I could do to try to pass the time. I skinned a rabbit I had up there and just tried to distract myself as long as I could. I was so eager to go look. On my way back to my shelter after I hit the shot, I noticed some bubbly blood. I had found the trail to follow. So after about probably 40 minutes had passed, I went back out to follow the blood trail. Found some good drops going for a while, but then they started to get less and less common. They started to dry up, and eventually I lost track of it. The blood and its tracks, couldn't find any more. Of course, I was just imagining losing this moose. But I knew I'd hit it pretty good. When I hit it and it spun around, before it ran away, it coughed. So I figured, I did at least get a lung. And I knew it wasn't gonna live, but I didn't know if I was gonna be able to find it. So I don't know. One thing I know is when you do make a pretty good shot on an animal like that, it's not going to want to run uphill. So even though I lost the blood trail and lost the tracks, I figured I'm just going to follow the shoreline, because I doubt it'll turn inland and run up the hills when it's wounded. So that's what I did. I followed the shoreline, and sure enough, I came across the moose. Saw it, the little brown mass laying up ahead. Is that it? Oh my goodness. Got so excited. I just laid down immediately and hid behind a log, and that's the footage you see me there. 3 hours of some of the most up and down emotionally. It's just so intense. I was just so pumped. But then, the moose would stand up, and you're just like, no. You just picture it running off, and then it would fall back down. Stand up, fall back down. Several times over the course of the few hours. I did want to go up, and I wished I could go up and put it out of its misery, but I just imagined if I got close to that thing, it was either going to jump up and run off. There's a chance I could finish it off, or it would turn and charge me. I didn't know. Angry, wounded moose. So I just sat there, let it calmly die. And when it finally, I have it on footage there, you can see on the show, when it stood up, again, I was just so nervous, but then I saw it shiver and fall over, and it kind of, the legs kicked up. I was like, oh my gosh. Walked over to it, touched it with my arrow. It was definitely dead. That was one exciting moment. But man, yeah, that was an intense few hours, I can't tell you. It's one thing when you're just hunting, but when you're hunting and you're survival in that situation depends on it. I knew I wasn't going to be able to live long on rabbits. You know, I'd gotten a lot, but they hardly, I mean, definitely stave off the hunger, but they don't really stave off the weight loss with as little fat as they have, so I knew I had to get something big. And when I finally got that, just the burden of starving just lifted off my shoulders. It was so nice. It didn't make me, I didn't feel like, oh, I got, you know, like, I'm good now. I got that, and it took the pressure off, but I actually still wanted to just keep providing food, because you never know how long the other people are going to be out there, and you never know what's going to happen, so you just, it took the pressure off, but it didn't make me stop trying to get other stuff. But man, what a moment. I took it, hauled it all back. It was a lot of work skinning it up. You can see I punctured the guts because, you know, you're tired from rolling this moose by yourself, and I hit the gut when I was reaching up in there. That was dumb, but it didn't really ruin any of the meat. It just made some of it taste a little funny, and just made me waste a lot of time cleaning it. Then what else? Oh, I think I'm the first person in history to skin a whole moose, process a whole moose with just a Leatherman, so that was pretty funny. But definitely a good problem to have. What else? Yeah, I don't know. I got it all up, took it back. You can see I put it all up in my shelter. I'm sure there'll be people yelling at me for that, but it was still too warm for my comfort, and I didn't want to put the meat too far from my shelter and have some animal come in and haul it off without me even knowing. I'd rather know if they were there, so you can see I had a lot of meat that wasn't super high hanging hung around my shelter. If any big predator came in, he would go for that first rather than the really smoky meat that I had hung in my shelter, so I figured I'd hear it shuffling around outside before anything happened. It was a risk I was willing to take for a couple nights just to get a little smoke on the meat so that it would preserve long enough to last to, you know, permanent frost whenever that was going to be. But so initially that's what I did. A couple days just slicing meat, smoking it. The other meat was hanging up in trees, and that's kind of where we left off with that episode. But that's the little bit more detailed rundown of how it all went down. So hope you enjoy it.
There you go.